You're listening to Mom and Doc Talk, where we talk all things healing pans and pandas with an emphasis on homeopathy.
Hi, I'm Jody, the mom.
And I'm Dr. Bahr, the doc, and this is Mom and Doc Talk, where we talk all things healing pans and pandas with a special emphasis on homeopathy. And today, as we wrap up our last few episodes on like basics about homeopathy, we're going to talk about the homeopathy healing journey. This is one of those things that really people have to shift a little bit about their mindset, right, Jody, in order to really truly understand and like get to the point of ultimate healing and success with homeopathy is to understand that it's not linear, right? I always tell clients when they get started working with me that I wish that healing with homeopathy was like getting on an elevator and you just push a button and it just goes in, like a fast track elevator too. Like you push a button and it goes right to the top of the floor you want to, and you get off and there's no hiccups in between. I even wish that it was like an escalator where it's slower, but it's a steady progression and there's not ups and downs. You just, move, continue moving upwards. It's not like that. It's like climbing a mountain. And I am a hiker, so I use this metaphor a lot. For most people, it seems to work, but it's like hiking a mountain with lots and lots of ups and downs. So we'll talk about what the healing journey tends to look like. Jody, before we dive into that, what do parents really need to do to shift their mindset to be able to be prepared for the healing journey with homeopathy?
I think there's nothing that can prepare you, but really I can go backwards and tell you what I wish I would have got in order to prepare me. And it was like the one single thing that I needed to understand was that going into the healing journey, the homeopathic healing journey, we were stepping into allowing Avery's body to heal and not forcing suppression. And I had no concept of the fact that the amount of time that healing was going to take. It takes a whole lot of perseverance. It takes tenacity. It takes surrender, which I'm sure we'll talk about here in a little bit. We just have to come to a place of allowing and just being a participant in allowing our child's body to heal. And there's I didn't know, like when we first started, I'm like, oh, sweet. Like we're going to give Avery these things and it's going to make her symptoms go away and she's going to be great. I didn't understand the enormity of the thing that we were starting. It took us getting really, quite a ways in until I was like, whoa, like we're literally changing how this child's body is functioning. And it's so cool and so neat, but it takes time and a whole lot of love and patience and persistence.
Yeah. I think that removing some amount of desire to control things is really, really beneficial, because the people who suffer the most are people who are wanting to control things the most and trying to control the symptoms and control how quickly things go and make things go on a certain timeline or to be in time for a vacation or whatever. And the reality is that it's one of the many things in life, the most things in life really, that we can't control. And so we can just control our response to the things that are going to happen that are outside of our control, right? So before we go down that little rabbit hole of all that, because I love talking about that and I could talk about it forever. Let's talk about what the healing journey typically looks like, just to set the stage for that. So what we start to see is generally 2 to 3 steps forward and 1 step back, another 2 to 3 steps forward and 1 step back. It could also be 5 to 6 steps forward, and you could take 6 or 7 steps back at some point. So that's why I compare it to hiking a mountain. So we start at the parking lot at the base of the mountain, and we want to get to the peak, and the peak is where we have that optimal health and ultimate healing, right? And so we are going to start hiking up, and then there's going to be ups and downs along the way. And when we're going in and down, it just means that we need to make a small adjustment to the remedy that we're using to help the healing in order to continue back on that trajectory of hiking toward the peak. So when we're going down on a hiking trail, we are grateful because we're getting a little bit of a break and our legs can cool off for a second. We can catch our breaths before we take another big hike toward the top. It feels bad if we want to like put things good or bad, when we see symptoms start to return a little bit. That's where the downhill is. So 2 to 3 steps forward is an improvement, and then we'll see a few steps back where we see a small regression of symptoms. All we have to do is make an adjustment and we can get things going in the right direction again. It is not that it's no longer working. It's not that this won't work. It's that a normal part of the process. And like I said, it adds up over time to get to that ultimate place where we're not having those setbacks. We're not having any, falling down or regressions or anything. We're just doing well, and our body can handle what's given to it, and it can respond and bounce back on its own without any adjustments to anything. There can be things that can impact the way that trajectory happens. So it's not always 2 to 3 steps forward and 1 step back. Sometimes you have just the perfect set of circumstances that you can make a really robust response to remedies, and you can do 8 or 9 steps forward, and you make really, really huge progress for this period of time with this particular set of circumstances, or the body's just ready and able to make that healing response. And sometimes you're going to make like a half step forward because there might be a whole lot going on. They might be under a lot of stress. There might be infections that they're being regularly exposed to. There might be obstacles to healing that haven't been identified yet. And so it might be like a half step forward. And then similarly with the steps back, ideally you'll be in touch with your homeopath regularly so that you can intervene as quickly as possible. So when you start to see a step back, you can make an adjustment and do so at the appropriate time. But sometimes like there's just an environmental or circumstantial thing that the setback is a lot bigger or feels a lot bigger. And suddenly things that have been gone for a while are back with a vengeance. Jody, you had that experience with a dental thing come up with your daughter.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen it a lot of times where, and even I had in my personal healing journey, I had a really massive setback, like 4 years in. And it was, of course, scary and felt like, oh my gosh, was this whole time wasted? Did anything matter? And that's part of the healing journey that we seem to see with pans and pandas that tends to happen, where we have a big regression that is usually what we call the last hurrah. It's enough of a phenomenon that we've came up with a name for it, where the body's just sort of saying, here's what I got left. Let's tackle this. But those can be really, really big steps back. And it, again, does not mean that it has failed. It does not mean that it won't work. It means that we just need to listen to what the body's telling us, get things going in the right direction again, and then we can ultimately get to healing. So, like I said, there's just like with hiking, there's a lot of things in the environment that can come in and impact. So like if you're on a perfectly beautiful sunny day, that's exactly like 68 degrees and it's the perfect temperature for you, that you might have an easier hike than if you're trying to hike on a 90-degree day or 110-degree day, or a day with 30-mile-an-hour winds, or a day that's 31 degrees, and that it's snowing and it's raining and that there's ice on the trail. So there's going to be things that environment that are going to impact how quickly you can go, how much progress you're going to make, the impact of the trail itself. Lots of different things are going to impact the way that you would get to the top of a hill that you're hiking, and would also impact the way that your healing journey is going to be. And even if we're talking about like Jody, if you and I went and hiked the exact same mountain, I promise I'm almost done with my mountain metaphor. If you and I went on a hike together and we hiked the exact same mountain, we are not going to have the exact same experience, right? Because we have different levels of fitness to start, different levels of familiarity, different levels of comfort on that trail. So like I might get to the top and be like excited, ready to go. Let's do 10 more miles. And you're like, I live in a flat part of the world. I don't hike regularly. I want to die. Like this was so hard. And you might be like coming up, huffing and puffing behind me. And I'm like skipping and ready to go. Mm-hmm. And that also it's the exact same trail, the exact same thing. And even along that trail, like you might have gotten bumped by somebody who knocked you over and like you twisted your ankle while you got bumped, and I didn't get bumped by that person. So I, again, have a different experience. So
I feel like
Take all that and translate for moms.
no, I feel like so what you're talking about to me makes perfectly good sense. Like I have the privilege of having hindsight. Whenever I look
Right.
back at Avery's healing journey, I very clearly see 2 to 3 steps forward, 1 step backwards, 2 to 3 steps forward, 2 or 3 steps backwards, 7 steps forward. Like I see that, like the clear back and forth. But whenever we were in the middle of it, I couldn't see that. I didn't
Yeah.
see that because we, especially in the beginning, there was still so much symptom management going on. And I was still holding on so tightly to controlling things. And I couldn't get past the fact that every time we took a step backwards, that homeopathy wasn't working, because that's how my brain was programmed, right? If I give my kids something and they go backwards, then that means the treatment didn't work. In the midst of that, I couldn't see what we're talking about right now. But now I see that perfectly clearly. There's just so much between managing symptoms, between my post-traumatic stress that I was experiencing, especially when Avery would regress. And I'm like, oh my gosh, here we are again. Like what we did has done nothing. It's all gone. We're just, backwards. So it's interesting because I feel like this all makes perfectly good sense to me now, but I also acknowledge, like in the midst of it, it's a hard thing to visualize and trust.
Right. Because we're human and we want to have as much of a magical and perfect experience in everything that we possibly can. And so it's human nature to, even if you're told this could happen, or this is the way it's going to likely go, everybody still, well, not everybody, but many people will still come in and think, but maybe it'll be different for me. Maybe my kid will be the easy one, or like every once in a while, like, people will have like this magical, wonderful story of healing with homeopathy that it's like overnight, doing great, takes almost no time, one remedy, maybe a couple of potencies of that one remedy. It can happen. Those are rare though. Those are like the ultra unicorns, not even like unicorn. Those are like ultra unicorn cases where one remedy and a short period of time and a couple of potency adjustments is all that's needed to get somebody to fully recovered. And that's about a lot of luck and just a whole lot of rare circumstances. Most people need multiple remedies, multiple adjustments, and several years to get to full healing. I shared in my when I shared my story of healing, which was in episode 12, that it took me over 5 years, and there are still things that I mentioned in a recent episode too. There's still things that I'm working on, not necessarily from my likely PANS diagnosis, but other things that are still connected to my susceptibility.
Yeah, I think I'm always contradicting myself because I say one thing, then you say something, and I'm like, wait, no, it was that too. It was like a blend of magical moments and then emotional moments. I still say, like, both of my kids, I think one of the most insanely amazing thing that I will ever experience in my entire life is like watching their bodies heal, like watching them go from just terrible health, terrible quality of life to what they are now is like, and there were so many moments in there that were like, holy cow, like there's no way that just happened. That was so cool and amazing. So it's like both of these worlds of still being in the struggle, but also like witnessing what it looks like for the body to start healing itself and working better. And like that whole process of regaining health, even though it was really, really painful, it was so freaking cool at the same time too.
Yeah. And you've had experience too with your two different daughters, who one had a faster healing journey, not fully unicorn, but more on the unicorn side, just with the length of time. And then another who's got a lot more complex stuff going on, and has since birth that's taken a lot longer. And, so you can both experience the like faster side and the more road weary working at this. There's a lot that has to be taken care of to get things fully where you want her to be.
Yeah.
one thing that we should talk about that's part of the healing journey is the shift when we get into what we call the second half of healing. And so it's not necessarily the second half. So like once you are quote unquote in the second half of healing, it doesn't necessarily mean, well, if it took 2 years to get there, we've got 2 years left. And it doesn't mean that half of the symptoms are gone necessarily. So there's not like an exact time frame when we say that we're in the second half of healing. But what we call the second half of healing is when we start to see a slowdown in how the body tends to respond to remedies. And our next episode is going to be all about the ways that we respond to remedies. So we'll talk a little bit there about the different ways that people respond and how that responses can change over time as well. But we will see a slowdown in the way that you respond in general to remedies, and the symptoms are just a lot more subtle. And so we get into this place where it's a little bit more challenging to manage, and sometimes even honestly a little bit more challenging to select remedies, because we just don't have really robust symptoms and really robust responses to go on. And so that does require a little bit of mindset shift as well, because when you get used to homeopathy and you get into the way that homeopathy works to nudge the body to do its own self-healing, and we can see some really profound things that can occur as a result of homeopathy, then we start to expect that, okay, this is what healing looks like, this big jump that I saw with this remedy, and I want to see that all the time. And if it doesn't do this, then it's not doing anything, or it's not doing enough. And we start to judge and compare the way a response to one remedy in one circumstance is to a different remedy in a different set of circumstances. And so again, if you're climbing a mountain, and let's say the second half of healing is the last 10% of the climb, not even the last 50% of the climb, the last 10% of the climb. The reality is, one, your body is more weary. That's not the case. Your body's actually stronger with healing from homeopathy, but it's going to be, there's just not as much room to make jumps for. So like if you get the energy from when you're doing your hiking to like take big strides, you start like jumping to try to get to the top. A jump isn't going to take you quite as far. Like if you were to say, I'm going to jump 10% of what I have left, a 10% jump from the beginning of a 10-mile hike is much bigger, because that would be a whole mile, versus a 10% jump from the last mile of the hike where you're only going to jump a tenth of a mile. So the jump is going to be more profound when you have more healing to do, versus at the very last bit, a jump that's is just not going to be as profound because you just don't have as much room to improve anymore. So what sort of struggles did you deal with in the second half of healing?
Felt like it was, again, like a blend of really difficult and also really cool at the same time. The struggles I had specifically was the pace at which it moved. It felt like, because I wasn't seeing those bigger shifts, it was more difficult for me, because I was like, we're literally going to do this forever. Like, this is just going to like, this is what it's going to be like, because we're not really making an impact anymore, which we were. It was just little smaller shifts. And also, I think I really wish I would have been doing homeopathy for myself in the second half, because I think that's where my post-traumatic stress started showing up more, because the couple of regressions, multiple regressions, but then also like Avery's big regression, those like rocked my world. Like sent me to places that I should not. I went to because of my own post-traumatic stress, but I went way deep into like almost depression and just complete devastation, because it felt as real as the beginning felt. And so those shifts were really hard for me. And that, just the perseverance that has to happen in that second half of healing is, you just have to keep going. And then it feels like you get to the end and it's like, oh, okay, well, all we have left is tics and some confidence issues, which are causing issues at school. And those feel like such a big deal, even though like we're coming from a list of like 20 symptoms and now we're down to 2. To me, those still felt really difficult to deal with until the end, until they just went away.
Yeah. It does help when you can recognize that. So the second half of healing is generally most PANS symptoms are gone, if not all PANS symptoms are gone. And there's just little things that are left that you're dealing with that might be some lingering attention issues or some physical issues or, whatever it happens to be. So things that we typically say, usually when you're in the second half of healing, if you could stand back from yourself and separate yourself from the situation and recognize, if I didn't have a kid who has a PANS diagnosis, I wouldn't be calling the doctor for these things. That's usually when you're in the second half of healing, when it's just like little things here and there, not really substantially interfering in life, maybe in some ways interfering in life, but also interfering in life in the way that like a lot of kids will have little things that will come up that will interfere with, how they're feeling on that day or whatever. So it's good to have that perspective and that ability to look back and remember where you came from. Again, I'm going to go back to the hiking metaphor on the mountain, that the last, or even like people who run a marathon, they always say the last 0.2 miles of a marathon are harder than the first 26. Right. And so like that last little push to get to the top of that mountain after you are so tired. So the weariness is true, not necessarily from the body that's healing, but from the parent who is supporting the child. Weariness is a legitimate thing that will show up in the second half of healing. And so if you get to that place and you're like, oh my gosh, I've got a mile to go to get the end of this 10-mile hike. And I've climbed 2,000 miles of elevation. Like you're tired, you are ready to be done. It can be really helpful to be able to stop and turn around and look and see how far you have come, to help you realize, I can do this last little bit. I can do this. I can get there. And it's a little bit harder than trusting in your own body to put one foot in front of the other, but really it's the same thing. It's not trusting in your own body. It's trusting in your child's body, that it has the capacity to heal if you give it enough time, the right nudges, and send it in the right direction and remove any obstacles. It can do it. And I think that part of it is that we just don't want our children to suffer. We don't want them to have any hardships or anything. And that's just not realistic, because they're humans. And so trusting in yourself that you have the capacity to sit with the discomfort and the things that you can't control, and trusting that your child's body has the capacity to do the healing, and then allowing things to do their work. You can definitely still get there.
I think that the coolest part about the second half of healing was it was when we started to taste the fruit of the seeds we had planted 2 years prior. It was the time whenever I started seeing Avery's body shift into doing the things that we wanted it to do. And really, like, I really, really loved as needed dosing in the second half of healing, because it was like, maybe a game is not the right word, but it was so wild to me to think that start off this healing journey. And I thought I had to always be giving her something to like cause and effect. Like I needed to give her something to hold her where she's at. But then to kind of slow that down and be able to dose her and then watch her body do its thing. But then also at the same time, watch life happen to her and watch her body start to go through like illnesses and watch her body recover by itself without giving remedies, or go through really difficult emotional things and have her not have like a PANS response to it, like have a normal human being response to it. Seeing her shift into her body doing it the way that like our original goal was to get her to hear. And in the second half of healing, starting to see that, and then really getting further into it and really experiencing it was like, oh, like, yes, like, thank God we stuck with this. This was my beginning goal. I didn't understand it. Thank goodness you did. But this is what we were going for. So the second half is really like an interesting, exciting transition.
Yeah. It makes me just realize one more thing that we should mention to anybody who might be listening to this, who is in the second half of healing or who comes back to it when they're in their second half of healing, is that there can be an urge, because you'll see that your kiddo is responding for longer and longer because their body is healthier, it's stronger, it's able to have a longer response to a single dose of a remedy. It might be weeks or even months between when doses are needed. There can be an urge to say, well, I haven't given anything, and I want to give something just because I haven't. And the reality is, like, homeopathy is not something that's just like it's not like a multivitamin that like you need it every day. It's a nudge to the body to heal. And if the body's moving in the right direction, again, back to the mountain, if you're hiking the mountain and I'm hiking with you, Jody, and you're struggling and I come and I like try to get you going, if I nudge you and you get going again, that's great. But if I nudge you and nudge you and nudge you, one, it's going to get really annoying if I keep nudging you and you don't need it. And two, if I nudge you too hard, you might fall over. So it's going to be agitating and irritating. And so like the reality is it's a nudge to get the body going in the right direction. Then we got to let it go and let it do its thing. And so it can be hard when the body it's when it's, especially when you've been like hovering around your child and like, what do I need to do? What's going on? What's causing this? And like trying to figure out, being the medical detective that so many PANS parents have to become. It's hard to make that adjustment to starting homeopathy, where you just need to be the medical observer and not the medical detective. And then as you're going through and needing fewer and fewer doses, because there's so much more healing that's occurred and the body is stronger and able to last for longer on a single dose, it's hard to not like want to intervene just because you haven't. And I always remind people, like, you're not going to give somebody, ibuprofen for a headache that they don't have just because you haven't given ibuprofen in a while. So it's a very different type of medicine, but like that helps people understand a little bit more. Like you're not going to like nudge somebody you're not going to like push somebody who's already moving in the direction you want them to go, because you might knock them over. So any final thoughts for people about the healing journey? Embracing it, mindset, adjusting to it, anything that we should share before we wrap for today?
I think the best thing to do is to try and remember why we came to homeopathy. I know there's a whole bunch of different ways that we get to homeopathy, but I think we all have this universal understanding that we are at this point where we are more interested in healing our children's body. And again, like I said in the beginning, that healing process takes time. It takes submitting to the idea that we are going to allow this to happen slowly, and that our kids' bodies can do this. They absolutely can heal. And we just have to be in a place of support and love as their bodies heal. But I think it takes a million times throughout that healing journey, going back and reminding ourselves why we're here and what our goal is. And again, in my place of privilege, my goal was to have Avery's body functioning well, like a normal child would function. And so, I see that now. She is well, she is healthy. And so just reminding yourself that is your ultimate goal. And that, even though it's taking time, it's still happening and you're still going. I think that's the best advice I could give.
And we will wrap with that excellent advice and invite you to join us in our next episode, where we're going to talk about responses to remedies, both when you're first starting out and how things can change and adjust over time. So we hope that you'll join us there. Until next time, take care, everybody.
Bye, guys.
We hope you found this episode helpful, hopeful, and inspiring. We try to get a new episode out every week. You can make sure you don't miss any by following us on Spotify or subscribing to our channel on YouTube. If you want to connect with us more, join our Facebook group, Homeopathy for Pans and Pandas, where we have exclusive weekly videos and answer your questions about, you guessed it, homeopathy for pans and pandas throughout the week. If you are already a member, give us a shout out and let us know what you thought about this episode. If you aren't on Facebook and would like to reach us, you can email us at podcast@resiliencenaturopathic.com. Until next time, take care and remember, this won't be forever.